Okay, this is from week 1 notes. We're going to be talking about expressions and equations. First, we're going to learn about the operations. You know the operations, they're adding, subtracting, multiply, and dividing. So we'll go one by one. You know that it's, say, 5 plus 2, that's 7. What if you're adding two negative numbers? This is going to be -7. When you think in terms of, say, elevator, you're at ground 0. So this means go 5 floors down. And then plus -2, that means go 2 additional floors down. So where are you at? You're 7 floors down. So that's why it's -7. So that's a big adding. How about subtraction? Okay. Another easy one, say 5 minus 2. That's a 3. How about if it's 2 minus 7? What would that be? Well, that would be -5. Okay. How about if it's -2 minus 7? Well, then that's a little tricky. Again, if you think of it in terms of an elevator, -2, that means you're at the ground level, go 2 floors down. And then -7, that means go 7 floors in addition to that. Boom, 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 boom. So at the end of the day, you're at 9 floors down into the ground. So that's 9 minus 7. Moving on to multiplication. Multiplication has a couple ways to we have a couple ways to show multiplication. For example, 7 times 3, 7.3, parentheses. Or if I multiply a number and then the variable, nothing in between. We will not be using this or this, but we'll be using parentheses, and if there's something between two things, a number and a variable, that's implied multiplication. So we're going to use parentheses and nothing in between. Whenever you see parentheses, remember that it's almost always likely to be multiplication. Multiplication have a couple different rules. So for example, if you multiply 2 positive numbers, 1 negative, and then 2 negative numbers. The rule is, if you multiply 2 positive numbers, positive, positive, you get a positive number. If you multiply a negative number and positive number, so negative and positive, negative wins. So this is -21. Same rule here, positive, negative, so this is -21. If it's double negative, a negative number multiplied with a negative number, the rule is, if it's negative, negative, it becomes positive. So the rule is, if they're same signs multiplied, positive, positive, it's positive. Negative, negative, they're the same sign, so the result is a positive number. If the signs are different, you get a negative number. So moving on to division. These are all the same. This is a fraction, and a fraction is just another way of writing a division. So you might see this, but we're typically going to be using this and then the fraction. Okay? Another thing you need to know is exponent. Say you have something like this. What does this mean? Well, this means multiply the base, the big number, by however many times the small number says. So this means 7 times 7 times 7, which is at 343. So this big number is called the base number, and this little number is called the exponent, or sometimes called a power. Okay. So this, not the same as multiply two different numbers. So you gotta be careful with that. This is this. This is 21. If you want to write this in your computer, say for example in Microsoft Word, what you can type is something like this: 7 little hat 343. One confusing thing about exponent is what do you do with the negative sign? Say for example we have these two things. So the exponent applies to the something immediate in front. It's to the number or to the group that's right in front of the exponent. So in this case, this 2 applies to the whole thing that's in the parentheses. So this is the same as writing -5 times -5. So that's 5 times 5, 5 times 5, that's 25. And again, if you multiply two negative numbers, you get a positive number, so that's a positive 25. On the other hand, this case, this 2 only applies to the 5 in front, not to the -5. So that's the same as saying -5 times 5, 5 times 5, and then there's a negative sign. So this, in this case, the answer is -25. So the order of operation you might remember this from high school. P-E-M-E-A-S. So this is parentheses. This is exponent. Multiplication. Division. Addition. And then subtraction. So what this means is that if you have a long expression with a bunch of these included, all included, what you do is you do the parentheses first, then move on to exponent, multiplication, division, and then to addition, subtraction. And you typically do from left to right. The parentheses themselves have their own pecking order, so you do whatever is in the parentheses first, then you move on to what we call the brackets, and then we go up to what we call the curly brackets. So here's an example. Simplify this. Okay. So what do you do first? Well, according to this rule here, you do what's in the parentheses first. So 1 plus 6, that's a 7. So now with the parentheses, I'm going to go out to the brackets, so they're here. What's in between the brackets? Well, there's 30 plus. So within the brackets, they become 37. Now I'm done with the brackets. I'm going to go out to the curly brackets, where they're here. So what's next in operation? Well, there's a plus here and then multiplication. Multiplication comes first, so that's 23 times 2, that's 46. And now you add the 2. So if you add 37 and 46, that's 83. So all these brackets get reduced to just simple parentheses. So now I'm done with the parentheses. I'll go down the list and then go to exponent. So you see the exponent here, negative 2 to the 4th power. So this 4 only applies to the 2 here, so it's going to be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is 16. There's a negative, so it's going to be negative 16 here. And then the next one is do the multiplication of 51 times 4. So that is going to be 204 here. So there's a plus here, and then the minus here, minus 83. So if you rewrite this, one confusing thing about the calculator is that this is a negative sign because it's the very front, whereas here it's a minus sign. So to do a negative sign on your calculator, it's underneath 3. Looks like this. So type that in, plus 204 minus 83. If you type in as you see here, you should get 105. So that's how you do this kind of problem. Moving on to more terminology. So constants, those are numbers. So for example, like 1, 2, negative half. They're called constants because they don't change. You might remember from geometry pi, which is about 3.14. And then variables, these are alphabets like X, Y, Z, A, B, C, P. They're called variables because the value of those letters change from problem to problem. So when you operate between the constants and or variables, meaning you multiply, add, subtract, or divide among them, you get what we call the expressions. So for example, if I multiply 7 and n, I get an expression. 5 times n, that's an expression. X plus 2, or x plus 7. 7 divided by 2, x. 3 times z minus 1. These are all expressions. The expressions become equations when you make it equal to something else. So for example, 7n is equal to 14. The difference between the expressions and equations are that you see that there's an equal sign. If you see an equal sign, that's an equation. Okay. X plus 7 is 10. These are all equations. So you'll be asked to simplify expressions. Simplify. for example, something like 7n plus 5n minus n plus 12n. So how do you simplify expressions? Well, you have to know a few more words. Say 7n. The number in front of the variable, in this case the 7, this is called a coefficient. Right? This is called a term. And then these, say for example 7n, 5n, negative 3n, by group together they're called the like terms. For two reasons. One, they share the same variables. So in this case n, 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 n. And the variable is to the same power. In this case, it's a power of 1, n to the 1, n to the 1, n to the 1. So these are like terms. So to simplify the expressions, what you're really doing is you're adding or subtracting the coefficients of the like terms. So back to this. Basically, you're going to add 7 plus 5. And then what's going to be here? Well, a lot of times in math, you don't see the 1 here. There's an invisible 1 here. So if you don't see a number in front, that typically means there's a 1 there. So in this case, it's going to be 7 plus 5 minus 1 plus 12. So if you do the math there, that's going to be 12 minus 1, 11, plus 12. So that's going to be 23n. And that's as simplified as possible. So I simplified the expression. Another rule or the property you need to know is distributive. The rule is something like this. Say I use letters. So for example, this. In this case, what happens is that because this property, this distributive property, this 7 gets distributed to the x and to the negative 3. Okay. And the operation between these two things are multiplication because you can see their parentheses. So 7 times x, that's 7x. 7 times negative 3, so that's negative 21. So that's how the distributive property works. So what kind of problem would you encounter with that? So for example, you might see a problem like simplify this. So we already did that one. It's going to be 7x minus 21. So what happens here? Well, it's not just the 8 that gets distributed. It's negative 8, this whole thing. It's distributed to the 4x and then the 2. So negative 8 times 4x, negative 32x. And then negative 8 times 2, so that's positive and negative, so that's going to be negative 16. Which one are the like terms? Well, 7x and then negative 32x. So if you do the math there, negative 25x. It's going to be negative 21 minus 16, negative 37. That's your final answer. Just a quick note, the like terms, you know that these are like terms. The numbers are always like terms between themselves. So negative 21, negative 16, negative 37. sometimes we ask to evaluate equations. What does that mean? For example, you have an expression 5x evaluate this when x is, say, 1. Well, how do you go about doing that? Well, first of all, replace the x with the parentheses. So that's the process. So I'm going to replace the x's with the parentheses. Always do this. And the second thing is, whatever the x is, just plug it into the parentheses you just wrote. And then solve. It's going to be 5 times 1, so that's 5, minus 7 times 1, 7, plus 3, 1. Say when the x is 5. First step is always the same. The second step will be replace these 1s with the 5. And then solve. So in this case, it's going to be 5 times 25, 5 squared, minus 35, plus 3. So 5 times 25 is going to be 125 minus 35 plus 3. That's going to be 93. That's your final answer. So the next rule is the biggest rule of them all. Well, not yet. Okay. One thing you have to know is what we call the symmetric property. That means if you have the equation like this is called the left-hand side. It's the left-hand side of the equal sign. This side to the right of the equal sign, that's called the right-hand side. The symmetric property says you can flip them if it's an equation. It doesn't break anything. So in this case, this is equivalent to this. So what's the Goulding rule in algebra? It is a rule of equality. Say I have 5 plus 5, which is same as a 10. Say you have two $5 bills, and that's equal to one $10 bill. Say I give you $2 extra to the left-hand side. To keep this equation equal, what I have to do is add the 2 over here. That's the rule of equality. If you do anything to one side, in this case, add 2, you get to do the exact same thing to the other side, add 2 to the other side. Or if I subtract the 2, I have to also subtract the 2. If I divide the 10 divided by 2, then I have to do the same thing to the other side. So remember this, to do, what we're going to do for the next couple weeks is solving equations. It's the primary reason you're taking this class. There's a couple ways to do it using the table or solving the equation and following the steps. I'm going to focus on following the steps. Bottom page 5 it says, first step to solving equations is simplify. Second step is consolidate. Last step is multiply or divide to get to this point. I'll show you with an example. Say you're asked to solve, and the keyword is solve. That means get to this state. So say you're asked to solve this. So what does it mean to simplify? Well, to simplify means the same as simplifying the expressions. So you look at the both sides, the left-hand side and the right-hand side, and simplify both ends. So if you look at it, 2x minus 3, is that as simplified as possible? In this case, yes, because 2x and negative 3 are not like terms. There's not much you can do there. And then the 9 by itself, well, that's as simplified as possible, so there's nothing for you to do. So for this example, the simplification part is done already. So now we're going to move on to the consolidate. Consolidate means that for this class, if I look at the left-hand side of the equal sign, all I want to see is variables. And to the right-hand side, to the right of the equal sign, what I want to see is just a number. So how do I consolidate? Well, you can do it looking at it one by one. So look at 2x. Is 2x, do I have to touch this? Yes or no? In this case, no, because 2x is on the left-hand side of the equal sign. That's what we wanted. The negative 3, on the other hand, we got to deal with it because this is a number, and then we don't want a number to be on the left-hand side of the equal sign. So we'll come back to that. How about the 9? That's okay as well because it's a number, it's on the right-hand side, no need to touch. So go back to the negative 3. How do I get rid of the negative 3? Well, that meaning, how do I make it equal to 0? It's like saying you owe me $3. How do you make your debt to be 0? Well, give me back $3. Add 3. But then the golden rule kicks in just the minute you do that, the moment you do that. If I add a 3 to the left-hand side, I gotta add 3 to the other hand, the right-hand side. So I'm going to do that right there. So if we rewrite this equation here, 2x minus 3 and plus 3, they'll go away. That's what we wanted. 0, we don't write the 0. 9 plus 3, that's a 12. So this is the way we're done with the consolidation, because if we look at the left-hand side, all I see is a variable. Right-hand side, I see a number, so that's good to go. So step 3 says, either multiply or divide to get this point. So if you look at here, we're almost there, but this 2 is in the way. So how do I get rid of 2? Well, undo the 2 there. And if you remember, if there's a 2 and an x, there's nothing between. That's multiplying. So how do you undo multiplication? Well, divide. Okay, let's divide. Divide by what though? Well, here's the easy part. It's always a number in front. You don't even have to think. You don't even have to think. It's right here. So I'm going to divide it by 2. And again, the golden rule kicks in, so I'm going to divide this side by 2 as well. 2 divided by 2, that's a 1. So you end up with the x. 12 divided by 2, that's a 6. That's your final answer. So let's use these rules, steps, to solve more complicated problems. For example, 5y plus 9 minus 2y is to 2y plus 3. So let's simplify each side of the equation. So this side, the like terms are 5y and then negative 2y. 5y minus 2y, that makes it a 3y. We're not going to touch the 9 because that's a number, there's no other numbers to combine it with. So plus 9. This side, this gets distributed. So 2 times 2, that's 4y. 2 times 3, that's 6, plus 6. So now I'm done with the first part, simplified. I simplified the left-hand side and the right-hand side. 3y plus 9 is equal to 4y plus 6. There's not much more you can do. Now we're going to consolidate. Let's look at each term. 3y, that's okay, it's a variable on the left-hand side. Now we gotta come back to get rid of the 9. The 4y, we also have to come back and get rid of it because we don't want the variable to be on the right-hand side. The 6, that's okay, it's on the right-hand side, it's a number. So how do you get rid of the 9? Same as before, negative 9, minus 9. Golden rule, minus 9 here. How do you get rid of the 4y? Same thing, minus 4y. And golden rule, minus 4y. So 3 minus 4, that's negative 1. But we don't write the 1, so negative y equal to, they go away. 6 minus 9, that's negative 3. So, we're at step 3. Negative y is equal to negative 3. So, what is this negative y means? Well, if you remember, there's a negative 1 in front. Negative 1 in front, and then there's nothing between the 1 and the y. So that means that's a multiplication. How do you undo the multiplication? Well, divide. Divided by what? Well, the number in front here is actually negative 1. So I'm going to divide it by negative 1. So the final answer is y is equal to 3. Okay. So that's it for expression and equations.